Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 81. My name is Nbz and I'm here alongside my co-pilot, my Bally. He's here, he's ready to talk about some things. Maybe not that many things, but some things about Nintendo.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here ready to go, and like it's December. We're almost at the end of this crazy year that is 2016.
2016 can go fuck off as far as many people are concerned, I think, Bally. But I don't know.
But you know what? You know what else happens in December?
No, what does happen, Bally?
My two favorite people have their birthdays.
Oh wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
Who are these people? I've never heard of them.
Jesus and Nbz.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
me and Jesus hold the same standing. That's very impressive. It's very impressive.
We're
You're right,
born in the
Bally,
same
of
month
course.
as Jesus.
Yeah, you know, I literally am the reincarnation of Christ himself. As we all know, Christ was a huge Nintendo fan, so shout out to him. Yeah, it's going to be a good show, Bally. We've got some Game of the Year stuff coming up. How about you tell people what we're going to be talking about?
So we're going to very quickly mention games we've been playing. Then we've got like just a very small mention of a little bit of news that happened that we wanted to touch on that is Switch related. And then for our second segment, it's an extended segment, and it is our first Game of the Year special segment for 2016. And that is, of course, our top 10 games of the year that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year.
Of course, the most convoluted phrase in all of our podcast
It has
history.
to stay convoluted.
We love it. We'll continue to do it. That's a good one. There's not much fighting going on there. It's just us expressing our love for the old games that we played in 2016. So be sure to look forward to that because that's the bulk of the show. But as Bally mentioned, video games have not been something that Bally has been had much time to play in the last couple of weeks.
It's been very, very busy, and especially when I've been delving into two really long games. It's been quite... I really like playing long games for long stretches of time, and I've just not had long stretches of time to tackle these games. So they've kind of sat to the side a bit, which is a bit annoying, but I'll hopefully try and fix that for next time. But Nbz, what have you been playing? Because I have dived into this game a little bit, you might say.
Yeah, and you also played it multiplayer a few times before, haven't you?
Yeah, I've played it multiplayer a little bit with friends who've been at mine, and this game is obviously Runbow, which was also part, and we keep mentioning this all year, don't we? The Nintendo Humble Bundle.
It is, yes. That's one of the... I guess if you want to put a phrase on 2016, it would be Nintendo Humble Bundle. That kind of makes up the bulk of a lot of our chat. It's a cool game. It's interesting. And I have basically beaten it. When I say beaten, it means I've gone through the kind of main single-player stuff. Seems to be a lot of modes on the main menu, if you noticed, Bally.
Yeah, it's quite intimidating, isn't it? It's sort of... The first thing I looked at, I was like, where actually is the single player? Because it sort of splits multiplayer modes. Its menu is almost akin to something like Smash Brothers, really, in a weird way.
Yeah, it does kind of have that feel to it.
It's a lot of modes.
Yeah, totally. So there's online stuff which I don't think allows me and you to play against each other. It seemed like I jumped into it real quickly, and it was like, hey, add another player. So it's like, you could take two people locally and play online against other people. Maybe it lets you do friend stuff, but it seemed like random matches. So I was a little bit wary of that.
And I couldn't find anyone. I tried it for a bit today, and I couldn't find anyone online.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a Wii U indie game that not a huge number of people bought, and despite the Humble Bundle, that was a while ago. I guess if we had tried playing this when it came out with the Humble Bundle, there would have been way more people probably, getting it for the first time and trying it out. But that's the thing, when the install base is this low and you have that kind of niche of a market for these smaller games, yeah, you probably won't be able to find anything when you're jumping online, which is a shame because I think that this game probably shines the most when you play it multiplayer, and that's what I discovered when I was playing through the single-player game is I found the game kind of bland. It's cool and it has some neat ideas, and essentially the premise is it's a platformer where you are challenged with various tasks in each level. Sometimes it's simply get to the end to find the trophy, sometimes it's kill this certain number of enemies, other times it's collect this currency, and along the way the levels you basically pick from this menu, which is basically a chessboard, And the idea is you beat a level and it kind of unlocks the ability to do 2 levels adjacent to it. It's kind of like, your Smash Brothers comparison before. It's like the challenge board in Smash Brothers, where when you beat a challenge, it kind of shows what you need to do for the adjacent squares. So you're essentially like looking down on this chessboard, and I think they're color coded, so green, orange, and red, which indicates easiest to hardest. So you can kind of maybe try and take a path of least resistance. And the essential premise is you have these 4 different squares in the different areas that are boss stages, and you essentially need to make your path through this entire chessboard to those 4 stages to ultimately unlock a final kind of battle at the end. And it's very short. It's a campaign that you can blast right through. I beat the whole thing yesterday, and it only took me maybe 2.5 hours. But there's some interesting stuff in there. For me personally, the physics are not the greatest. They seem like they were designed for multiplayer and to have a lot of chaos going on, to the extent that they don't really feel that refined. The animations are not very expressive or exuberant. They're very kind of stilted. And I did find moments where I was kind of like, not necessarily glitching off things, but having hitboxes and things like that kind of whack me away and around that didn't feel natural or that fitted with the groove of the game. Bally, you've played like a few stages. How do you feel about the movement and the controls and everything? Is it jiving with you? Because I know you're less sensitive to this stuff than me.
I think the controls were fairly average. I mean, I would agree with you. They're not incredible, and obviously I'm not as pernickety as Nbz is when it comes to controls. And I have
a sixth sense in
myself. The Mario Karts all feel the same. Just don't deny it.
Don't. You're so wrong. You're so wrong.
But this game, I thought the controls are fine and they work really well for what this game is going for. In terms of like the structure of the levels and the main central mechanic of the color changes within the platforms. So the platforms are all different colors, but when a platform matches the color of a wave of background that comes onto the screen periodically as you're playing through the stage, certain platforms appear and reappear based on the color that's about to take over the stage. I'm not sure I explained that terribly well, to be honest, but it's
quite hard to explain. But it's almost I wouldn't say it's necessarily rhythmically with the music, but it does have a beat to it, with the sense that like every however many seconds go by, a different color will change to what the background is, and they do give you an indicator for it, so it is well telegraphed. It's like, okay, there's a sequence to it, so you know what they're going to rotate between, and there's also a little kind of, before it fully goes across, it kind of peeks out and shows you, oh, orange is coming, get ready, and then it's orange. So it gives you time, if you're standing on that colored platform, to be like, okay, need to get ready, make sure I'm out of the way before this happens, because it's going to screw me over.
Yeah, and I think it works well, and it's a neat thing. And you're right, from the single player I've played, it does feel a bit lacking. It's a bit sort of platformer by the numbers, and obviously the unique selling point of this game is I believe the multiplayer goes up to 9 players, which is kind of just like a really cool, original, unique thing for a 2D platformer to do. So I definitely would like to try to get as many controllers and people in a room and just have a go at this at some point. I'm not sure how confident I'd be in getting that number much beyond 4 or 5 players, but I think I'd like to try that before sort of coming down on this game hard, because you're right, it's not doing enough that's very special really in such a obviously 2D platformers. We've played many 2D platformers that all do incredible things, and it's not cutting the mustard, is it really, when you compare it to them?
And that's the problem. I think it is hard to criticize a game that is primarily built around multiplayer when you don't have the means to access it that way. I mean, if you were someone who played Triforce Heroes, for example, and could only play that single player, well, that game's like a fucking 1 out of 10, because you literally have to have like the most dexterous, like ridiculous skills as someone playing that game to even feasibly get through any level, because you have to do everything for yourself, and it's designed around the fact that you shouldn't be having to do that. And these levels do work single player, I'll give it that. Like, it's not the case where, like Triforce Heroes, it's completely broken. But But yeah, it feels like those mechanics are there to screw over multiple players on a single screen. So say, the orange platform is the safe one and you're the one occupying that space, well, someone else can kind of kick you off it and then take it for themselves. And that makes a lot more sense in the context of, hey, this is kind of it's a competitive game, and it kind of encourages people to screw with one another. I wouldn't say it's this is a phrase coined by Total Biscuit. It's co-optional, which is the name of his podcast, but it's the idea that you have a cooperative game that can alternatively be competitive if you want it to. I don't think this is necessarily a co-optional game. It's very much a first person past the post. But there are some nice things about it. I really like the fact that it includes a bunch of shout outs, should I say, to different indie games, different really characters. Cool. Actually, when we interviewed Peter at Gamescom, I believe that he mentioned that the Teslagrad kid was a unlockable character in Runbow. And so we have a lot of these nindies kind of getting together and throwing their characters in there. I believe Shovel Knight's a part of it. I haven't unlocked him yet, but I did unlock Rusty from SteamWorld Dig. I have unlocked Commander Video from the Bit Trip series. So there's lots of cool crossovers going on there. There's also DLC to download Lilac from Freedom Planet and Shantae from the Shantae series, of course. So that is cool to see. I do like this notion that all these indie developers are kind of, banded together in the trenches together. They all kind of support each other. They're in each other's games. It's cool. It's like the Smash Brothers effect, but amongst all these different studios, like within their own games. It helps like promote each other and just, the sense of community, I think that's great. And Runbow kind of lends to that because you want to have a community of people around to play it. So it does make sense. And I don't know, it was challenging, it was fun, and it was, there are some cool ideas in there and some cool mechanics and some levels that you really kind of almost bang your head against and you're like, oh man, this is actually pretty tough. Like, you definitely need to be on your game. There are some things they throw at you later on that you're like, wow, this is actually pretty neat. And I kind of think to myself, some of those harder levels, like, I don't imagine how, if you have 9 people, anyone gets to the end, because me on my own with no distractions, still really difficult. So like trying to compete with people while trying to get across sounds like a bit of a nightmare. But that's probably what they're going for. They're probably going for this whole idea of just chaos. And I can appreciate that. So hopefully one day I'll get to play this multiplayer. For now, it was fun. It was a short experience, but if you have this in the Humble Bundle, I recommend checking it out for a couple hours. It's not going to do you any harm. So definitely give it a go. It's Runbow. And yeah, so that's going to be the video games for this week. I've played some other stuff, but we're running on time because of the Game of the Year things. So Bally, we're going to move over to a little bit of news, which was quite the surprise that happened earlier this
Huge
week
surprise.
When Reggie Fils-Aimé, the big dog at Nintendo of America, showed up on Jimmy Fallon. Now, before this happened, we all knew he was going to have an appearance on Fallon, and everyone assumed, correctly so, that they were showing off Super Mario Run, and that they were going to be like, hey, Fallon, promote this fucking game for us so we make millions of dollars. And Fallon is like, well, yes, of course, I am the person who sucks PR's dick, so I will do that for all of you. So he did his thing, did Super Mario Run, but curiously, Bally, under a question block in the center of the stage they're presenting, was something else, something that no one expected to happen. The first public reveal and kind of showing off of the Nintendo Switch with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild running on it. What is your reaction to this having happened? Because I remember waking up, looking through Twitter while I was taking a dump in the morning, as I usually do, and being like, wait, whoa. They showed the Switch on Fallon? They showed the Switch? What's going on here? So how did you feel about that?
It was super shocking, and you text me and you were like, have you seen the Fallon thing yet? I'm like, Fallon thing? What? Reggie was on Fallon. Oh, what? The Switch was on Fallon? So like, I watched the 10-minute video and I was just pretty shocked, and I thought that the Switch itself looked really, really great in the flesh, and it's worked so well. I thought the dynamic between Fallon and Reggie was a really It was unusually awkward, but still very entertaining. And obviously, Reggie's in constant PR mode, and he's getting out all his PR on Mario Run, and obviously with the Switch. But it was really exciting just to see the Switch on such an elevated platform, like in terms of the media and everything. And I thought it did really well. I thought they conveyed the idea that you can play on the big screen or you can play on the system itself and take it with you on the go. Like, they conveyed that really well. I thought it rendered really well. It looked really good. And I think that I would argue a lot of people who saw that video are probably thinking, you know what, that Switch thing looks kind of cool. I'm intrigued to see how much it's going to cost. And it's at least, even if people aren't sold on it yet, they at least are aware of it, and that's something that I don't think the vast majority of people will have been, just from the reveal of the Switch, which I think would have aimed far more at, you know, people engaged in video games like us, for example, who are constantly on Nintendo's YouTube channel checking when stuff's coming. And like, I think that for a wider audience, it was a really good first experience of, hey, here's this new cool thing Nintendo did. They're the company that did the Wii, and here's their next thing. Are you interested? Maybe not, but here we go. Have a look.
Totally. It was actually exemplified, I think, by the fact that when they pulled the Switch out of its dock and Reggie handed it over to Fallon, there was a gasp, a sort of like reaction from the audience that, oh my God, this is what this thing does. It transfers from the television completely seamlessly to this device that you can take anywhere with you. And people may have thought, is that like kind of, the crowd being told to woo at certain points? But I feel like it was actually a genuine reaction, because you think about kind of people who go and watch Fallon are not necessarily the kind of people who are going to be that keyed into what's going on in games and necessarily know what the Switch is. So I think like that as a legitimate surprise to people was impressive enough for them to be like, oh wow, this is really cool. So we did get a kind of a better look at it. We got to see some of the backside of it. Fallon, of course, was talking about like the kickstand and putting it out. He actually, and I think a lot of people are very cynical about Fallon because it's his job to sell products, to be a mouthpiece for celebrities and for companies and all that stuff. It's the whole premise of a late night talk show. If you want to get cynical about it, I enjoy watching them. I find them very entertaining. But the kind of enthusiasm he has for video games is actually, I think, more plausible than most other TV show hosts or late night hosts. He definitely seems to know what's going on. He kind of has a better knowledge than most people, and there is something legitimate about his excitement, as maybe overblown as it could have been. There was that GIF floating around of him at was it a baseball game? I don't exactly know what event, but there's this GIF basketball of him like excitedly describing the Switch with his hand gestures to someone else, and he's not being filmed there. That's just him on his own. I think there is. It was a good choice, I think, to get it to Fallon, because he is someone who will evangelize these things, but also has kind of a real passion for them, and was kind of showing that when he said stuff about like, oh, I know, the whole story about Miyamoto and how he used to go out into the woods, and the Legend of Zelda was originally created because of his adventures outdoors. So I appreciate that, and I think it was smart to put him up there.
I thought that on top of Reggie being there, and you're right, Fallon he does seem genuinely enthused about what's going on with the Switch. I think that's really positive. But it was really funny just to see Shigeru Miyamoto in the audience, and he was like the sort of cutaway comedy of the 10 minutes where everyone was just like, oh, it's Shigeru Miyamoto, and everyone laughs at him. It's like, hey, there's a crazy Japanese person in the corner. And I like, it was very hammy, very cheesy, a bit over the top, but it was exactly the kind of thing that Nintendo loved to do with Shigeru Miyamoto, and I think it's what he loves to do, because he's just
such a fun presence.
Yeah, exactly.
Like every time you see him in a public setting, he's always just smile on his face, like loves being there, loves the attention. Absolutely, like he is just a kid, he is just so enthusiastic and positive and joyful, and like we saw that on the Apple stage when he walks out, and wondrous applause, and even here, like everyone's like, oh, this guy, he just seems like a nice dude. And I like the interactions back and forth about how he's doing like the thumb thing,
Oh,
where
God,
like
you
you
have
put
to
it
mention
down
the
and
thumb
twist it
thing.
upwards, and then the internet took to that and just made these amazing gifs of like reversing it and his thumb going down and then like putting quotes next to it. Oh, it's so good. I love when that stuff happens. But yeah, it was really awesome to have him there and have Bill there as well.
Do you think that they knew that those gifts were going to come with the whole thumb up, thumb down thing when they made it a big deal?
You know, I don't know. Nintendo seem more and more self-aware of the memification
I'm
of them as a company. I don't know. I'm not sure if that was scripted. I think it must have been. Like,
I think it was scripted. I'm just wondering if Nintendo knew that it would be semi-viral in the way it was. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, you know, it's, to be honest, I'm not sure how viral it is. We have to remember we exist in this bubble on Twitter where we see all this shit and probably not many other people do. But again, like, it's just, overall, I just thought they came across very positively, you know, like Nintendo was on form there, and that, you know, for public perception, that just seems good going forward when Switch is on the market.
It's the perfect sort of little hype to get going before January 13th, right? It's January 13th, is it?
I mean, it's 13th in Japan, I believe.
Yes,
it could be the 12th here. It could not. Who knows what fucking time it's going to be. We'll see. I don't know, Bally. I don't know what ungodly hour we're going to have to stay up until.
Oh, God, it's going to be horrible.
I hope it's not bad. But I'm not going to miss it for the world. You know, I'm not going to fucking miss that.
Yeah, of course not. You can't miss it. This is huge.
Yeah. So, but maybe let's talk a bit more about the Switch and Zelda and that sort of stuff. People were saying it looked like final retail product when Fallon put it down on the table. Seemingly a lot of kind of text on the back that seemed to indicate, this is pretty much what the end result's going to be. And you mentioned before how you thought it was very slick and thinner, and I was kind of surprised by how small it was comparative to what I thought from the trailer, because this is a real life setting. It's kind of the first time we've seen it in that, and it is kind of surprising. I was like, this is kind of iPad size in terms of thickness and in terms of width and everything. So I'm definitely interested to see how I'm going to be able to fit it into bags and carry it around and all that stuff. So that kind of is a good thing to see. But there's also kind of these two buttons on the back that someone pointed out, these two kind of small circles that seem to perhaps be the method by which you unclip the two Joy-Cons.
Spring-loaded buttons for the Joy-Cons, right?
Yeah. So, that makes sense. They would have had to, implemented those at whatever point. So, nothing else I think of significance. Is there anything about the Switch itself and the device that you wanted to point out, Bally, or should we move on to Zelda?
No, nothing new. I just thought that I agree with you. The size was a little surprised, a little smaller than I thought. It looks an awful lot sleeker than a Wii U gamepad, for example. And
yes,
considerably
absolutely.
Smaller.
It's kind of hard not to look sleeker than a Wii U gamepad.
That's true.
But,
a brick looks sleeker than a Wii gamepad. But
maybe.
No, I totally get where you're coming from. But let's talk about Zelda.
So Zelda Breath of the Wild didn't really see much new in terms of area or gameplay. It seemed like the E3 demo, the plateau kind of area, and Reggie showed off rolling a boulder down a hill to blow up some bokoblins.
He used the famous line as well. He said,
what was the line?
He said, you see all those hills over there, those mountains in the distance? You can go anywhere that you can see. And it's just like, oh, wow. Yeah. Nintendo just 15 years behind when it comes to...
just a little late to the party on that one.
Late to the party.
A little bit.
But still, it's cool in Zelda, and we've talked about this before, but yeah.
As we said, Reggie in full-blown PR mode. Of course he's going to say that. It's going to bring out that line. But yeah, in terms of the place and the setting, didn't seem like much was different. But man, those barrels exploded, and there was no slowdown. Frame rate seems to be looking pretty good on this Switch version of Zelda. How are you feeling about the performance, Bally? Because they undocked it, and we didn't get the greatest look at the kind of over-the-shoulder when Fallon was playing it on the screen itself. But from what I could glean, seemed like it was a hell of a lot smoother and cleaner than we had seen before. And especially when you compare it to what I thought was an atrocity of a showing at the Game Awards, when they were just chugging on the Wii U, it seemed a damn sight better to me.
Yeah, it looked really good, and there was sort of this over-the-shoulder camera fixated on Fallon, which was a bit unusual. It was a bit strange setup, but from what that funny angle, it did look very good. It looked very sleek, and that's really promising. And obviously, we're going to pick up the Switch version, not the terrible Wii U version. I guess most people will, won't they? And it's really positive that the Switch version is looking as good as it does.
Totally, yeah. It maybe indicates the power of the Switch that there's not really discernible graphical differences. But for me personally, I would take a smooth frame rate over high resolution textures any day of the week. You know, like Definitely. That's just how I prefer it. So I think they're making the right choices, which is good. But yeah, it was a kind of an out of nowhere thing that I just didn't expect this to be a significant event for us to care about, considering Mario Run is not really the forefront of my mind. But I was impressed overall by the Switch showing. I'd
be interested to see sort of how many views that video's got online on YouTube, etc., and just see like what's the reach like.
Last I checked was 1.7 million, and that was maybe like a whole day after it had gone out. So it's probably got a bit bigger than then. Cool. But Fallon's clips tend to go pretty big. It's definitely like his market, and this was again very smart because Fallon caters to a younger audience through the YouTube stuff, through the way that he doles things out in these smaller bite-sized chunks that are kind of lapped up by, you know, people like us who aren't sitting down every night to watch a late night show, but will easily go and watch a 5-minute segment.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's a very smart way to do it. It's the way that, you know, he's kind of pushing forward and making sure that he's still relevant. And ultimately, I think that's why Nintendo went to him, amongst, you know, the reasons of him actually caring about games and all those other things. But
real positive.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, well, that is going to close us out for the first segment, Bally. Join us after the break, however, when we shall return to discuss the Games of the Year, Part 1. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to the second half of the show. We're in it. It has begun. Game of the Year.
Oh, yes.
The happiest time, Bally. The happiest time. And we are going to dive into our top 10 games that we played this year that didn't come out this year. The tradition continues. I remember the first time we tried to explain this and we're like, well, that's a fucking mess. Clearly, we'll eventually figure out a better way to say that. 3 years later, Bally, we still haven't.
It's part of the show now. It has to have that name. It's top 10 games we played this year that didn't come out this year. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's tradition. You can't buck tradition. And just like Nintendo, who keep their stupid fucking live system in Mario, we're going to keep this fucking thing in the show. So
just like that.
So there you have it.
Just like
Absolutely. So before we jump into all that stuff, I thought it would be a good idea to check out some of your top games of the year. So I asked you to send in some emails, and we got a few. So we're going to read some, and then we are going to jump into our the first half of our top 10s, and then we'll take a break, read some more, and finish things out. So sounds like a fun time. Bally, are you ready to rock and roll?
I am ready. It is that time of year.
All right. Well, Bally, how about you read the first email that we have?
Our first email is from James M., who's from Vancouver, Canada. He says, "Hi, Bally and Nbz. It's been well over a year since I wrote in last, but I wanted to contribute my list of the top 5 games I played this year that didn't come out this year." What a mouthful. I've written a little blurb about each game here, so I'm interested to see if you guys agree or disagree with my opinions. Number 5, Costume Quest. As a big fan of the original 2 Paper Mario games, I was able to draw a few parallels from them into this game. It's not overly lengthy or challenging, but it was a fun world to explore. Number 4, SteamWorld Dig. While the concept of this game may appear to be quite shallow or uninteresting, I found that it was addictive to keep digging away to see just what I would find next, the lower I travelled into the earth. Found the controls very tight and was impressed by how complex this game was, even though it was based on a simple idea. Number 3, The Last of Us Remastered. It's The Last of Us. What more do I need to say? This should probably rank higher on my list, but I had already played the original version on the game on PS3, so felt that a remaster should not be worthy of first place on my list. Number 2, The Banner Saga. Similar battle style to Fire Emblem, but with dialogue options that can result in character deaths, and a story that is far more interesting than those in Fire Emblem. Still think Fire Emblem is a better series, but this one is certainly worthy of giving a go. Definitely recommend this to both of you more than anything else on the list if you haven't checked it out already. Number 1, Digimon Cyber Sleuth Story. Including this game may be considered cheating. The game was originally released in 2015, but the English version didn't arrive until 2016. Regardless, I had to give this game a shout out because it was absolutely addictive. I would definitely recommend this to anyone who owns a PS4. While the initial similarity to the Pokemon series may be viewed as a turn-off, this game is far better than anything Pokemon has ever released, and I'm a big Pokemon fan. Keep up the great work, James, Vancouver, Canada.
Well, thanks, James, for your list. A few in there that I myself have played. Costume Quest, I played as my 52nd game at the end of last year, and that's a real fun one. Nothing like too spectacular, but I enjoyed it. It was very short, like little RPG. SteamWorld Dig, we obviously both love. The Banner Saga is one that I've been thinking about playing for a while. I think I might actually own it on Steam. It's the thing, Bally. With Steam, I never know what I actually own and don't because there are so many humble bundles.
I feel like so many different Steam games, their names merged together and things, and I really struggle to remember which one's which and what's going on.
Well, Banner Saga, as he says, is a strategy game. It's a kind of Fire Emblem-esque thing with a cool art style and that sort of stuff. But yeah, this Digimon game, people are talking about it. Kyle Bossman from Easy Allies, he was talking about it earlier this year. And I will say, James, that is absolutely 100% cheating, but we'll let you get away with it. So there you go. The next list comes in from Simon S. from the Netherlands, who, I don't know, last year we kind of noted he had some interesting taste, and we'll continue in that vein this year. So at number 10, he had Hyrule Warriors. Number 9, Wii Fit U. Number 8, Contra 3, The Alien Wars. Number 7, Metroid Fusion. Number 6, Metroid Zero Mission. Number 5, Code of Princess. Number 4, Sonic Generations. Number 3, Advance Wars Days of Ruin. Number 2, Never Alone. And number 1, Art Academy Atelier. So an eclectic list from Simon, never disappointing on this show.
It's people like Simon who write in that really make the show, I feel. Like, they're just so unpredictable. That number 1 just came out of nowhere.
Right?
Just, Simon, I don't even want to try and predict your top 10 for next year because that is a really unusual list.
It's an impossible task. But some cool things on that. Advance Wars Days of Ruin. I know, Bally, you want to play that at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
And the 2 Metroid games, a little lower than I would like to see them. But, it's your list. It's your list. So there we go. Thank you, both of you, for those 2 lists. Some cool stuff, some interesting games in there. And we'll hear some more from you in a bit. So before we jump into the top 10, we're just going to give a few honourable mentions for some games that we may have had on the edge of our lists but didn't quite make it in. Because, it's hard to narrow it down to just 10 games because there's lots of cool stuff that we play every year and we want to kind of make sure that we're highlighting everything. So Bally, what are a couple games that you didn't quite have enough passion for to put on the top 10?
So I played 15 games this year that didn't come out this year. A couple I'd like to mention. I'd say Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure.
Okay.
It was a really unusual game, my first ever really sort of proper rhythm game. I think that the rhythm elements were very fun. I think the story was interesting enough, and it was quite a cool game. There was just a lot of sort of clicking about maps and things, and there were parts of that game that are incredibly slow paced, I thought. I'd also want to mention Kirby and the Crystal Shards for the N64. I got this on Virtual Console yonks ago from you, Nbz, and it was really cool, but it was just quite short, and it did some interesting... It's a Kirby game. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a really good Kirby game, but it's a real Kirby game by the numbers. And yes, the added ability to mix two abilities together was a nice, cool addition. And I think that sort of a 2D plane rendered in a 3D world looks great, especially for an N64 game. But it's not quite as good as the 10 games I'm about to talk about. But Nbz, what would be some of your sort of games that didn't quite make it?
So I've got 3 choices here. I was going through my list and I was like, I don't know if this has been a great year for like old games for me personally. And then I was like, okay, well, let me just put in a list like the things I absolutely have to have on here. And it turned out I had 13 games that I absolutely had to have on there. So a bit of a heartbreaker that I had to cut some. So the 3 that I cut were, first of all, Infamous Second Son, which I talked about recently on the podcast. I love the Infamous games. I think they're all awesome. But this one, as great as the gameplay is, and you know that's my main thing that I love when I'm talking about games, I'm talking about how they flow, how they move, and all that stuff. It just lacked character, it just didn't have the punch, the kind of comic book kind of aesthetic of the old Infamous games, and it just felt a bit sterile. And it was enough, to kind of maybe push it off the list, unfortunately. Great game, really enjoyed it. The other one is, or the other 2, Advance Wars, Bally. I know you'll be sad to hear it didn't quite make
Very
it.
sad.
When I was looking at it, I was like, I enjoyed Advance Wars. I really had a great time with it, but there were moments where I just thought,
Wanted
fuck
to destroy
you.
everyone.
Fuck you. The difficulty just spiked a little too much. Like, there were certain maps that there was one in particular that I was like, how in the fucking hell did anyone figure this out? I had to follow a step-by-step guide to get through it. And that final level, Bally, Jesus, like 3 hours of just intense struggle. I beat it, and I'm proud that I did, but yeah, some of those difficulty spikes really they took me by surprise. So I really enjoyed it, but stuff like that is going to put me off, unfortunately. And the last one, which I wanted to be on this list because I thought it was great, but is Freedom Planet. I thought that was a real surprise for me. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. So colorful, great stuff going on with the characters and the storyline, and yeah, it was, I don't know, maybe those long levels just maybe kind of pushed me away from it a little bit, but there are some other really good games on this list, Bally, so it's really hard to nail them down, as you know. So those are the honourable mentions. With all that out the way, Bally, I think it is finally time to dive in to the top 10 games that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year. I will give it over to you to kick things off with number 10.
My number 10 is a game you just mentioned, Nbz. That's Freedom Planet.
Very good.
I really enjoyed this game. It's probably my favorite 2D platforming Sonic-inspired game, I guess you could argue. I think that...
I don't know how many Sonic-inspired games there are, but it's probably the most prominent example.
Not a ton, and I've not played many of them at all, but in terms of sort of like a fast-paced 2D platformer, I don't know. It did a lot for me. I agree with you. I think the story was really unexpectedly entertaining and quite interesting.
It had that kind of, anime, cartoonish vibe to it, and, the voice acting was cheesy and hammy at points, but I think that it really fit the aesthetic it was going for. Yeah,
and they create a world that is very cohesive, even though it's very zany and crazy and anime, like you said, and there's some boss battles that are fantastic, and the music is just so over the top and exciting, and I didn't enjoy playing this game for long periods of time. I thought it was quite intense. I'd normally play maybe one level at a time, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, actually, that's probably one of the reasons why I left it off my list. Was I was playing this in the evenings, and I kind of went through a level each night, and I was like, well, that's enough for me. I think just the way the game is structured, it's like, man, in a 2D platformer, I like short levels, so I can just jump from one to the other, and this one really felt like kind of an endurance test, 20 to 30 minutes sessions really were like, oh, okay, I can't really justify starting another level because I know how long it's going to take, it's not that one more thing aspect to it.
But Nbz, what is your number 10?
So my number 10 is the third Professor Layton game, Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. I I think this is the best Professor for Lesser Layton game that I've played.
Lesser Layton?
It's the best of the trilogy, I think. I think it culminates in a great way, has some cool story payoffs, and just from a premise perspective was very interesting to me. As we know, I'm the time travel lover on this show, and so, of course, it's a sort of story that I'm going to invest in much more than you, but the puzzles were really good. I think that they were streamlined in a better way. There were more ones that related to what were going on in the story, and less so the sort of variety of, hey, it's a random puzzle that kind of comes out of nowhere. And I really still like the novelty of those cutscenes on a DS, like there's something about it that in the new era of games on 3DS and like on console generally, cutscenes don't impress me, but for some reason, like the DS hardware, like as weak as it was, I just didn't expect that sort of stuff, and they really just go for it, and those things look great, they run well, and they're a bit compressed and everything, but they kind of add to the aesthetic of Layton in a way that if it were just these still images and kind of moving from place to place, it wouldn't have that sense of attachment to the characters that I feel as a result of them kind of going all in with the voices and having, them interact with one another in a cutscene format. So, I strongly encourage you to, get on the series at some point, Bally.
Yeah, and, it's one of those ones I mean to get onto, and there's something about it that appeals to me. Quite a lot. And there are other Layton games that came out after this, but for my money, I think this is probably the best one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that's my number 10. What about you, Bally, with number 9? My number 9 is Shantae and the Pirate's Curse.
Okay.
So this is another Nintendo Humble Bundle game. I
feel like this might be a theme that propagates through
the
list a little
that
bit.
sort of hit us like a wave in about March, and I was like, wow,
yeah,
I've got games to play.
Absolutely.
Better play these. And most of those games were sort of shorter games, I would say, which was nice to mix it up.
They appealed to you particularly. I know that you struggle to get long games in and done quickly.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Helps.
I definitely often bite off more than I can chew when it comes to long games. But Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, it's like a Metroid game, but with the structure of Zelda's dungeons. Like, it just works so nicely, I thought. It was really enjoyable to play. There's massive platforming elements, but like I said, with the Zelda dungeon format, there are these islands that you visit, and each island has like a process you go through to eventually get to the dungeon. There's a weapon in the dungeon used for the boss, etc., etc. I thought
it's actually a really good way to put it, actually, because it is that idea of an overworld, and I mean, even when you're getting to the dungeon area, it doesn't feel very Metroidy, because as I express my distaste for those kind of linear segments, that's not really what Metroid is about, going from left to right. And as soon as you jump into the dungeons, all of a sudden you're like, okay, so here we are with the kind of graph paper look that I wanted. That's a good description of it. Yeah,
exactly. And it does what it's aiming to do very well. It knows what it's doing. It has some weak parts. I think using money, you can definitely make the game a hell of a lot easier, but maybe that's not so much a bad thing. And I definitely did invest quite a bit of money to make elements a little easier, because if you do this without like sort of the power-ups and the bonuses and things, it's a really, really hard game.
Can wear you down for sure.
Yeah, and it's a tough game in general, but yeah, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, really enjoyed it.
Great music on that one as well.
I
believe that's Jake Kaufman. So yeah, that stuff is real good. So my number 9 is the sequel to my number 3 game of last year. It's Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. I spent a lot of time playing this game. It's really long. It's way longer than the first one. I believe it took me like 30-ish hours, which for a visual novel, I don't know, they generally tend to take their time. But I still really loved it. This series is so good. It takes these elements, these ideas that I just from a fundamental level satisfied with, like the idea of the court scenario, the idea of the killing game, like that Hunger Games setup it's twisted, of course, but it appeals to me from a narrative perspective. And Danganronpa 2 goes in a very similar direction to the first, in a way that makes sense. And that's the reason why it's not higher on my list, because I think it is very kind of, following the footsteps. It's not really breaking new ground. But it does go crazy. And as I think I talked about when I talked about it on the show, it pulls a Metal Gear Solid 2, which for people who've played that know exactly what that means. And just kind of... it does some weird things. It kind of breaks the fourth wall in a way that is cool, that I didn't expect, and kind of freaked me out because I was playing this like late at night, and I was like, okay, why is my Vita doing this? It's not right. It shouldn't be happening. But I liked it in the end, and yeah, it's very, very good. It's obviously the sort of thing where you don't want to go in and play the second one before the first, go in order. But yeah. I definitely, this is a series that I'm invested in, and the third one coming out next year, so I'm looking forward to it. That'll be 3 years in a row. It'll be Danganronpa 1 in 2015, then 2016 for this game, and then the third one, 2017.
Will it come to Switch? Nice.
Oh, that's a good question, Bally. Man, you know what, like all these Japanese games, I do have a feeling that they'll want to put them out on as many platforms as possible, and with Switch kind of being a console-style thing and having the capability... I wouldn't be surprised. They're porting it to PS4, and that's happening with the first 2 games next year. Third one's Vita and PS4. But unless Sony has some weird marketing money going on behind the scenes, which I don't know that they would for this sort of thing, then yeah, I don't see why not. It's a good call. Totally. But yeah, that's my number 9, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. What's your number 8, Bally?
My number 8 is The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons.
La Saison.
I beat this fairly recently. I really like this game. I was quite surprised how similar... I know that you disagree with me on this a bit, Nbz, but how similar it felt mechanically to Link's Awakening, right. Especially seeing as it was a number of years later. And I really think it does 2D Zelda well. I don't think it does too much that's mind-blowing and different, but there are some really strong dungeon designs in here. There's some great bosses, there's some great weapons. The story is fine. I think that it's a neat idea the way that it links to Oracle of Ages, and I'm still yet to play that game. But Zelda Oracle of Seasons, it's a really solid 2D Zelda experience. It's quite hard to describe beyond that in short, but I think that is quite a good way to sum up, really.
Yeah, I mean, I played Ages, of course, and I'm just going to tell you now, it didn't make this list. But I think both these games are, they're the kind of thing where it's like, yeah, we'll get through them, we'll play them. But it's hard to pick out, like, elements that really stuck out. I think, the one thing I would say about the Oracle games that they do go a little weird. Like I think if we're talking about things that they take from Link's Awakening, I think the thing they take most of all is, like, the kind of dreamlike quality. Obviously, Link's Awakening is a dream, so you have those cameos from Mario things going on in there, but like the strange animals you encounter and some of the power ups you get, and yeah, just has an aesthetic to it that is a little bit off kilter, which makes sense for it being a Capcom developed game as opposed to Nintendo. But yeah, good stuff. My number 8 is Undertale. At the start of 2016, I was playing through a bunch of games that were like brought up in Game of the Year discussions from 2015. So I went through like Her Story and Sybil, and I was finishing up SteamWorld Heist. I played Fast Racing Neo, all this stuff. The one that really stuck with me was Undertale. And I was really surprised by how much it made an impact, and it obviously, with us playing Earthbound later in the year, it made a bit more sense to me, like where its ideas came from and where a lot of its sensibilities was derived. But just even on its own, I thought it is extremely well written and has characters that you attach to in a way that, looking at the kind of artwork that is used and the way they're drawn and the kind of simplicity of these characters, you would never imagine that they would have more, charisma and life in them than, these fucking 3D models of modern games. But, like, it does a better job writing-wise than most of these open-world big experiences. And that's something that can't be understated. Like, it's very important to realize how good writing can kind of transform things like this. And And that was really important. And despite the aesthetic being all over the place and very weird, it has a charm to it. You know, it has this real charm. And besides all that, like, the combat is strange, these unique enemy encounters that every time you fight something, you're doing a completely different action than you were before, breaks the fourth wall in a bunch of incredibly, like, astounding ways. And just, you know, I definitely feel that it was a little bit samey towards the end. Like, there were some areas that I was like, okay, I get you're trying to make a point here, but, like, let's move it on a bit. And it is a little bit slow to start. But if I step back and I'm like, okay, look at this from this perspective now, man, that game is really good. And it's not just this weird fervent fan base is like build it up. Like, I guess that people like really don't enjoy the fact that people go crazy over Undertale and they try and stick away from it for that reason. I'm just telling you, it's actually a really good game. So don't be put off by the weird fandom that surrounds it, because if you just play it at face value, I think you'll have a great time. And I hope it comes to consoles. Although there's some things the game does I'm not sure consoles would be able to do. But that said, I think that more people deserve to experience it. So it's my number 8, Undertale.
My number 7 is the shortest game on my list by quite some way, I'd say. And that's Super Mario Land 2, The 6 Golden Coins.
One of the greatest games of all time, according to our list, apparently.
We like this game a lot.
Yeah.
I owned this way back in the day, never beat it. Finally beat it, obviously with a bit of save states here and there. But
yeah, well, gotta fudge it.
it's really, in the same way that you can argue maybe the Oracle games are a little zany in the Zelda universe, this game's quite zany in the Mario universe. There's some interesting enemies.
You know,
bosses.
the thing that I really love about this game is when I was younger, the enemies didn't really feel weird because at that time I didn't have context for the wider Mario universe. So, like, this fucking strawberry with a knife in its head or whatever the hell that is in the horror level, I'm like yeah, that's pumpkin. That's everyone's favorite Mario enemy, strawberry with a knife in its head, right? Yep, obviously. I'm totally buying into this. So
yeah. It's just crazy, and it's very short. The world is really nicely put together, especially compared to a game like Super Mario Land 1, which doesn't really even have an overworld.
No.
This just feels better put together, more solid, fairly easy other than the final boss, I would say. And that's actually quite nice compared to a lot of these classic Mario games, which can get really hard. And
yeah, we may have talked about that a little bit earlier this year. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, we just love traditional 2D Mario games, but I mean, this one really stands out compared to the other ones, in our controversial opinion, or but
I guess in our nostalgia tinted lenses. But I think even removed from that, I just and talking about how it's very much more bite-sized, I think that's great for the handheld. Like that's how it was. It was one of these games designed around, hey, people are going to be playing this in short bursts, give them some short levels and some short worlds. Like those worlds, like 4 levels long each, right? Like they're very bite-sized, very consumable.
But it works well. It's got great pace to it.
Yeah, and I know some people don't like the whole zoomed-in nature of it, but I think those chunky sprites really give it a character that like the original Super Mario Land doesn't have at all. It feels weirdly, that Mario Land 1 just feels weirdly like bereft of personality when it comes to Mario himself. But this game fixes that for sure.
What's your number 7, Nbz?
Well, I think you'll be happy that this made the list because I really enjoyed this earlier this year. It's Pikmin 3.
Yeah.
And man, I didn't expect that Pikmin was like Metroid, but that's what I discovered when I played this game.
3D top-down Metroid.
Yeah, in a weird way. Like, obviously, it's all about the micromanagement and sending people off into different areas. But when you break it down, it's as if when you were playing a Metroid game, Samus, there was kind of a day-night cycle, and Samus would just go to sleep, and then you'd restart like in some room, and you'd have to retraverse the rooms to get back. That's kind of how I think of it in this weird way. Maybe one day Nintendo will do that if they ever fucking do anything with Metroid again. Samus's fucking dream world where she has to wake up and go and explore places again and again. Tangent aside, the thing that really stuck out to me and that really made me enjoy this game and makes me a little bit afraid to go back to the older Pikmins is the gamepad is really great. I love the fact that you can coordinate people to go where you want them to, and you can have them do their own task while you're focusing on something else. And it just feels like you can be way more efficient with what you can accomplish in a single day. And it alleviates that worry of like, oh, do I have enough fruit juice? Because like you get to a point where I'm riding high. I don't need to care about fruit juice for fucking 3 weeks. You know, like I'm going where no man has gone before. And to add to the gamepad controls that were really useful was the Wii remote control motion stuff, which it doesn't use Motion Plus, does it? I can't remember. I think it's just normal. So. Yeah, I think it's just normal motion controls, but it is exceptionally well executed. As I said at the time, probably the best use of motion controls I've ever seen, because they're so subtle. Like, they're so subtle, and they use depth in a way that is really smart. And it really makes me kind of bemoan the fact that a traditional Pikmin game on 3DS wasn't really used. Although, I guess trying to figure out how to control that would be a bit of a mess. But I would like to have maybe a 3D screen in Pikmin, because it has kind of that depth to the world that I think would really bring it to life a bit more. But as it is, it's a beautiful game. It's a really cool loop that they have figured out there. And I was very impressed, and I've been converted to Pikmin, so I'm all in. Pikmin 4, sign me up, Bally.
Nice. Well, I think Pikmin 3 is my favorite game on Wii U, and
it is, yeah.
I've already talked a ton about that game on this show, so I won't go any further. I'll just say I'm excited to see where that series can go for Switch, and there's some possibilities. I think it's a really interesting and cool franchise. But,
well, we've got that weird platformer to come before that happens, so we'll see how that goes.
That'll be a weird one. That'll be a weird one. So my number 6 is a game we cooperatively played together this year, Nbz. That's Affordable Space Adventures.
Affordable Space Adventures. I love to hate you.
I really enjoyed this game. I know that I frustrated you many a time, Nbz, and I know that the Let's Play that we recorded is still coming out, so the grand finale is yet to come. But
sure,
this game was so unique and does some really cool stuff that no other game system could do, like the Wii U, and it was just a real joy to cooperatively sort of get through each puzzle and work out what to do, shout at each other. There's just great design to this game. It was really enjoyable.
I felt that the great design was hamstrung by some very key moments where it felt like it was us trying to force our fucking selves through
a physics engine
that shouldn't have been as tough as it was. And for that reason, like, it didn't do enough for me to like elevate it. And I could definitely tell you were enjoying it more when we were playing it at the time.
Yeah.
It's definitely a kind of game that you really would get into. But yeah, some of the downfalls for me didn't quite make it. But yeah, I'm glad it's on your list. And it is, again, it's a rare time that we actually play a whole game together. We did it last year with Triforce Heroes, so maybe it's a once a year occasion, Bally, perhaps.
Yeah, once a year we'll cooperatively shout at each other.
Yeah, I'm not sure we could handle the friendship might break, if we push it anymore. So we'll leave it at that, and that seems good. So before we go to our break, let's talk about my number 6, which came literally out of fucking nowhere and surprised me super, super a lot. Speedrunners, which I was watching that Easy Allies video, and they were playing it, and I was like, this looks cool. And then I played through the whole single-player campaign in like a night, and I'm like, man, this thing's fucking like Mario Kart on crack, but it's a platformer, and you can fuck people over in such a cool way. And I don't think this game would have been this high up if I hadn't played it multiplayer. But thankfully, a couple of internet friends of mine, Nick and Gubbs, both picked up the game, and we had such fun playing it. I've only played it a couple times with them, but man, that game literally puts Mario Kart to shame. It is the most intense, like, fucking, filled with rage kind of intense action platforming experience I've had in some time, and screwing someone over with some of the items and like forcing them to get destroyed at the edge of the screen, there is a satisfaction like nothing else. And there's so many maps, they're all really well designed just around the entire concept. And this whole idea of like the screen slowly shrinking until it's this tiny little box in the center that any mistake you make, you are done for. It's so good. And Bally, man, I think you would fucking love playing this game. 'Cause like, It just takes those elements of screw you and throws them like even heavier than has ever been done before. So
I'd like to try this game. It does sound intriguing.
Yeah, it's great, and it's my number 6. So Bally, before we top into the top 5, let's read a couple more emails that people have sent to us. So let's start with this one from Rachel, and Rachel says, hi, Bally and Nbz. Thank you for reading my previous email. I thought I'd follow it up with, as asked for, my games of the year. And she gives us games that came out this year as well as old ones, but we'll read the new ones in our next episode, because that's going to be more focused on stuff that came out in the year of 2016, the year of our Lord, 2016. So starting with games that she played this year, Box Boy. She says, I picked this up when it was cheap around E3 and then obsessed with it until I had every crown. It's exactly what Bally and I did. It's a perfect, small, unique puzzle game that scratched an itch, and I loved it. Absolutely. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, another. I picked it up in a sale along with the rest of the trilogy. A game many recommended to me, but a genre I'd never dipped into before and enjoyed more than I expected. I look forward to playing others in the series once my backlog is shorter. Fire Emblem Awakening. Another series I never touched before, but thought I'd play before Fates hit. I knew next to nothing of Fire Emblem before playing this, apart from the Smash characters, and found addictive gameplay that made me a fan and led me to pre-order the Fates Special Edition. Rocket League. I think enough has been said about Rocket League without me adding to it, but as Splatoon did for me last year, this became my go-to game for a few hours after work, where, despite being pretty rubbish in reality, I keep going for one more game. And finally, Gone Home. While this is not a Nintendo game, and while some would argue it's not a game at all, this quote-unquote walking simulator was free on PlayStation Plus, and over several hours told a story that resonated greatly with me and that matched a great setting, and made this one of the few games I would urge everyone to play. Yes, not everyone will like it, but it is at its length, it is still worthwhile. And we'll get to her I said 2016 games next week. But Bally, any cool ones you want to pick out from there?
Yeah, I completely agree. Box Boy just came at a time and just found an itch I didn't even know I had and just went wild with it. I'd also argue I've played quite a bit of Rocket League with friends who own PlayStations, and I think that is a fantastic game. It's really addictive, sort of party couch co-op sort of game. Really enjoyed that. The other one's Fire Emblem. Love Fire Emblem, of course. And then I know a bit less about the other two, perhaps.
Perhaps, yeah. But the original Phoenix Wright is a great game still, amazing. And I should probably play Gone Home, because that's been sitting on my Steam for literally 2 years. So we'll see. But thank you very much, Rachel, for sending those in. Bally, you have the next email.
So we have one more email of top games that people played this year that didn't actually come out this year. So this is from Capsule J's from the internet. Dear Bally and Nbz, as this was the year of the backlog for me, 22 of the 27 games I've beaten this year were released in previous years. It was tough to compile, but here's my 2016 game of the year that didn't come out this year list. Number 10, Runbow. Number 9, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Number 8, Ebe, never heard of that. Number 7, Just Cause 2. Number 6, Final Fantasy 12. Number 5, Freedom Planet. Number 4, The Witcher 1. Number 3, Undertale. Number 2, Life is Strange. Number 1, Tomb Raider. Honourable mentions Yoshi's Woolly World, Rayman Origins, Lara Croft, and the Temples of Osiris.
Yes, Osiris. Osiris is the Egyptian god guy.
Right, yeah. Totally. I've cut, and then Capsule J goes on to say. I've come to the conclusion that making these lists is fun but completely absurd process. How the heck does one properly compare Final Fantasy 12 and Freedom Planet? I wanted to give a big thanks to you guys, not only for another fantastic year of podcasting, but also for recommending some of the games that ended up making it on this list. Wishing you the best for the holidays and the new year. Capsule J.
Well, thank you very much, Capsule J. We do appreciate that, and I agree with him. It is an absurd process that makes zero sense, but that's why it's fun. Like, that's why we compare Final Fantasy 12 to Freedom Planet and their relative merits and argue, because that's the whole point of Game of the Year. It's about arbitrariness, and we are the arbiters of the arbitrariness. So there we go. A couple that I wanted to pick out there: Tomb Raider 2013, fantastic game. I can see why you'd put that at number one, because I really loved playing through that, and I do think that those Tomb Raider games are doing amazing things. They play better than modern Uncharted, and they kind of look better as well. I think Rise of the Tomb Raider looked better than Uncharted 4, but again, I'm running that on a nice PC versus this PlayStation, which can't quite push it. But anything else, Bally, that you thought was interesting on this list?
They've got a couple of the good old Humble Bundle ones we've already mentioned on the show so far. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, and of course Freedom Planet. Two great games. Really enjoyed those this year. So yeah,
and Runbow, which both of us still have to get to at some point. So cool stuff. And you put Undertale there as well, which of course I just talked about. So, Bally, let's continue with our list. Should we quickly run through our 10 to 6 to remind people in case they've forgotten? So off you go.
Shall I go first?
Yes.
So my number 10 is Freedom Planet. My number 9, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Number 8, Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons. Number 7, Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins. Number 6, Affordable Space Adventures.
And my number 10 is Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. 9 is Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Number 8 is Undertale. Number 7, Pikmin 3. And number 6, Speedrunners. So, Bally, that brings us to the top 5. What is your 5th game?
It's Pokemon Red. Number 5 is Pokemon Red.
Classic.
It really is a classic. I was very skeptical going into this game. I was kind of getting swept away by the hype of everyone being like, oh, Pokemon is finally coming to the Virtual Console, let's do that. And I was like, you know what? I want to play that game. Like, I never beat it back in the day. I played lots. I played the first few gyms of all 3, Red, Blue, and Yellow, and I was like, I should beat this game, like actually do it. And
I really don't remember you owning all 3 of them, because that sounds crazy.
I really did. I swear I did. But I finally beat it. I had such a great time. I thought the mechanics just held up so much better than I thought they would. It's I don't think it's an easy game. It's easier than I remember, but I think if you know Pokemon, you know what you're doing, it's just really playable to go back to. And for anyone who sort of got into the Pokemon series after Gen 1, which I'm sure plenty of listeners have, even though that might be weird for myself and Nbz to think about, because we're like, everyone started with Gen 1, right? But that's obviously not the case. I'd highly recommend checking it out, because the original 150 sprites and those designs there still the best, and like in a year that's seen Pokemon Go and the craziness of that, like appreciating those original monsters, I think is well worth going back and doing. So yeah, Pokemon Red or Blue. You can play Blue, of course, but check out Gen 1 Pokemon. It's aged really well, I would say. I
mean, there are definitely some ugly sprites in there, especially when you send them out into battle. I remember looking at Blastoise and being like, what the fuck is this? Like, they're kind of splodgy, and hard to decipher, like, what is actually going on.
And now in Sun and Moon, they just come out in these full 3D rendered sprites. You're like,
yeah. Like, there's a consistency to the later Pokemon games that Red and Blue completely didn't have. Like, you look at the art style and all these Pokemon that get thrown out, and you're like, this was not drawn by the same person at all. Like, they all look so different, and the proportions are out of whack. But I do think that adds to the charm of it. Like, that was the part of that game that kind of made you fall in love with it back in the day, really, is like this association with all these different monsters that looked kind of out of whack. But but had some uniqueness to them. And I may slightly disagree with you. And I don't think the 150 are the best monsters.
You like Gen 2. You like Gen 2.
I think there's a lot of nostalgia. Yes, I do. I think Gen 2 is probably my favorite overall. But there's some other good ones. I think there's a lot of people who are quote unquote Gen 1ers out there who will deny the existence of anything else and only agree with the original.
Most
Pokemon.
People you speak to, like my work colleagues and things, when Pokemon Go came out, they just thought that was all the Pokemon. Like, people just aren't aware of...
Yeah.
Many people, I should say, not people. Many people aren't aware
Sure.
of generations beyond that first generation. And
I mean, it was a flash in the pan, so it was a big hit. So that's what people would know. So great stuff. My number 5, Bally.
Castlevania followed by a name I don't know.
No, Castlevania followed by No Name. This is the original, the NES Castlevania.
Number 5 for an NES game. That's impressive.
Dude. I think next to Mega Man 2, this might be my favorite NES game.
Wow.
It's fucking hard. Like, this is maybe one of the hardest games I've played. And usually that is a problem. We talk about the issues we have with NES games, but there's something about Castlevania and its kind of level design that is very specific. Like, each room is specifically designed with a purpose in mind, and there is randomization at play, and there will be moments when you'll be like, fuck you, Medusa heads, why did you go up and not down? But that said, it encourages memorization in a way that I find satisfying. And that's the real issue that I think I had with Mario 3 is Mario 3 encourages memorization in a way that I was not okay with because there were so many damn levels and you never had the right power-up necessarily at the right time. Whereas with Castlevania, everything you need is in the level itself. And if you want to make sure you get through and you have the holy water, well, you got to make sure you hang on to it. You got to kill all the monsters with it, and you got to understand that there is, all the hearts that you got to build up, and it just becomes this strategic thing where by the end, there were levels where I got to the end losing no health, taking 0 hits. Took me 2 hours for that one level, but I fucking mastered it. And there is a satisfaction to just grasping and mastering those mechanics. And totally in this day and age, the idea of when you jump, you don't have air control is real weird, but Castlevania is designed around that fact. And I think the whole notion that this game controls strangely, but is designed around being controlled strangely, works in a way that allows me to keep enjoying it in the year 2016. It's one of those satisfying mechanics, like whipping people, upgrading stuff, and taking on some bosses. This game's fucking great. And it made me mad, but it's also real good. Real good. So, the original NES Castlevania, my number 5, Bally.
Very good. Very good. My number 4 is, and it feels like an age since I played this game, is Fire Emblem Awakening.
Man, yes. Fates is you've played 2 other Fire Emblem games since then, basically.
I must be mad. Why am I playing so much Fire Emblem? But before playing Awakening, I'd only delved into Sacred Stones and completed Fire Emblem 7. So this was considerably easier, and obviously the production of the cutscenes, and I really enjoyed the story and things, and sort of creating child units and stuff like that. I really
it's similar
in
a way from you going Pokemon Red to Pokemon Sun in the sense of
way,
the
definitely.
GBA Fire Emblems to the production level and setup of the 3DS games.
Yeah, and this game is very much, it's very sort of, if you've never played Fire Emblem before, play this one sort of design, and that's understandable, and I think it works well when you're really trying to get into the mechanics and work out what's going on, and this game is really satisfying to play. And then obviously the mechanics change drastically to the Fate series, and I I've not decided whether I prefer sort of the Awakening mechanics more so or less than Fates, but Awakening definitely in my mind was just a really, really enjoyable Fire Emblem game. And
it kind of takes away a lot of friction, you know, and giving you the casual mode as an option and all that stuff. Like it's a welcoming. It's kind of like a big open hug of a Fire Emblem game, you know. Like it looks nice, it plays really well, it sounds great. It just has the ability for you to kind of customize the way you want to play it. Has all these fucking characters from the history of the franchise. This overworld map. Like there's a real consistency and coherency to that game. And I think even in a world where we have Fates now, and in some ways those games are better, in some games worse, I do think that Awakening stands on its own as just an excellent example of the series at its peak, you know?
Yeah, and I think for a series that is so renowned for beating you against the wall with difficulty and... you know, obviously units dying, that's the most famous thing arguably about Fire Emblem. To change that up and be brave enough to change that up, and they did get Nintendo got a lot of criticism for, you know, those mechanics changing, but you know, screw them. That's a great thing to do to make games easier, and you're given, if you want to play a hard game, you can make this a hard game, and if you want to play an easy game, you can make it an easy game, and I think that's a really valuable thing that shouldn't be forgotten, and it's great that this game does it with such high production values, and like you said, it really welcomes you into it. It's a really special game. So yeah, my number 4, Fire Emblem Awakening.
Very good. My number 4, Bally, is Apollo Justice, Ace Attorney. Everyone's least favorite Ace Attorney game, but I really liked it. I'm thinking back now, and I was like, oh, so my series ranking, I think, is, you know, the first one and the third one, because they're so good, and then Dual Destinies, maybe, and then this other one, and then maybe this one. But, like, I'm thinking on it now, and I think I like this game more than Dual Destinies. I think I like it more than the new one that's just come out. Like, it really, from a story perspective, it spoke to me in that way, and... there are inconsistencies that people keep pointing out, and I'm like, well, all of Phoenix Wright is kind of dumb and has inconsistencies, so I don't see why everyone's like so up the arsehole of this particular game. I think it has a lot to do with, at the time, people were worried about, you know, the direction the series was taking, and it was going off in this different character that people didn't necessarily like that much. But there are some real standout cases in that game, some slow moments, but I benefited from playing through it in such a short period of time. I did kind of blast through it in the space of a week and a half, which for a Phoenix Wright game, boy, that's some density. But it also really helps because these stories are so intertwined, where the cases all link back to one another, and there are things that you pick up on and remember and become significant details where before they seemed innocuous, and the ability to play it in that short span of time really adds to that sense of, I know what the hell's going on here. And that really spoke to me. Again, it's an older Phoenix Wright game, so the mechanics are not as refined as something like Dual Destinies or Spirits of Justice, where I like that, you know, you're not having to wander around case scenes constantly and figure out what you need to do next. But there is an element of that, you know, I think a lot of people enjoy, and that sense of being a detective and trying to get everything, you know, under your hood as quickly as possible. But it's the story that really stood out to me because it links back to the past and does that thing that I loved in the third Phoenix Wright game, where you're finding out the history and relating why that history from 7 years ago is relevant to today, and the threads that kind of tie them together. It's one of the things I love about shows like Doctor Who is, like, they always call back to these old things that happened, and you're like, oh shit, they just did that. They just fucking said that Captain Jack Harkness is the fucking face of Bo, you know? Those fucking moments, you know, I live for. And Ace Attorney, you know, Apollo Justice is really full of those. So it really kind of surprised me how much I loved it. So there you go.
We're on to the big three.
We are. It's the top 3 of the year, Bally. Yes, this is where the Mario Kart people stand and cheer, and everyone applauds.
So my Third favorite game that I played this year that didn't come out this year is Metroid Zero Mission. So this was
Well, Bally, it's funny you should say that. So maybe we should have a conversation together because this is my third game as well. So yeah, let's talk about it. Metroid Zero Mission, Bally.
It's easily the easiest 2D Metroid, but I don't think that makes it worse. It almost feels more slick in a way. It's shorter, but I think that some of the designs in terms of the sprites, and it's a very bright game. It was just really enjoyable to play. I think that in the same way I described Fire Emblem Awakening as sort of open up your arms and come into welcome to the Fire Emblem family, try out a Fire Emblem game. I think you can argue Metroid Zero Mission is the perfect 2D open up your arms and try out a 2D Metroid sort of game. You know what I mean? I think it's...
Yeah, totally. Like, especially from that difficulty perspective, it's really welcoming. It's not hard in any way. Like, I remember, and I think we kind of talked about this, how we got to bosses and we're like, oh...
Yeah,
they died. Like it's like you walk into Ridley, like, oh fucking, all right, I'm ready. I got
Ridley,
my tanks.
Here we go.
I have the missiles. I'm like, I am stoked to fight Ridley. And like 10 seconds later, he's dead. I'm like, wait, really? Yeah. Like that's how this is gonna go. But yeah, I agree. It's just so slick as an experience.
And I think having played Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, we were maybe coming at this game at the wrong stage, but nonetheless,
perhaps, yeah.
It's a really, really great game, and it's just a shame it came out such a long time ago and was actually the last one. So we won't get into that now, but we shouldn't. It's a sad tale. I don't want to feel sad. This is the end of the year. This is Game of the Year chat.
Yeah, exactly. It's hype. We love Metroid Zero Mission. And yeah, of course, if you want a deeper discussion on this, we did a whole episode where we spent like an hour and a half talking about all the intricacies of Zero Mission. And yeah, Bally, I think that, if we're going to recommend, hey, there's one game in the Metroid series that you should probably start with if you've never played before, I feel confident now saying Zero Mission is that game.
Oh, 100%. Like, definitely.
In the past, maybe I would have been like, yeah, Fusion's good. And Fusion was your first, which I recommended to you.
And I'm going to say, like, Fusion is hard. Like, I think.
Oh, totally. You're right.
I think there's so much space between the difficulty of Zero Mission and Fusion that another 2D Metroid would happily fit into. I would argue Super Metroid is closer to Fusion and probably hard in its own unique ways compared to
Super Metroid
Fusion.
For me is hard in the control department. I do think that game is in dire need of a remake. Like, I think that if they come out and be like, hey, we're remaking Super Metroid for Switch, that sounds amazing, because if you take the slickness and the tightness of Zero Mission and Fusion's controls and tighten up a bit of the UI on Super Metroid, man, that game could be close to perfect, like really close. But as it is, like, Zero Mission, stunning example of game design, stunning example of sprite work and just the GBA era at its peak, I think. And just a wonderful experience all around. And I know you weren't the biggest fan of the stealth section, but I think that is such a cool addition that really changed things up. And I'd like to see them maybe explore some different avenues of Metroid in that vein. So there you go. That was number 3 for myself and Bally, Metroid Zero Mission. So Bally, what's your number 2?
My number 2. It's more Metroid. It's Metroid Prime 2. Echoes.
Oh my goodness. Back-to-back Metroid.
Back-to-back Metroid. Metroid has done well this year. I absolutely love Metroid Prime 2.
That was really weird to me, Bally, because when we were talking about it, I did not get that sense from you at all. Like, maybe it was because you're comparing it to the original Prime, and in comparison to the original Prime, it doesn't do as much as that game did. But like when I was listening to you talk about it, I was like, oh, okay, seems like he enjoyed this game, but I didn't expect it to be this high up, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that it's so different to the first Metroid Prime in so many ways, and it's a lot longer and harder, and I guess that while my head was in that phase of playing it and just the game being so brutal, I might not have sounded as hyped, but when you perhaps look back on it, you might look at it more positively. I don't know if that's why I've put it so high, but it just really, it's so much darker than the first Prime game, and in lots of really cool ways. I think I don't, and I said this at the time, I don't want more 3D Metroids to be like this game, but I'm so glad that this game exists because it's doing a really unique thing on its own that is so creepy, to be honest, and quite unusual and unique. And I think that this game has a very valuable place in all the Metroid games. And Prime 1 is like just, this is Super Metroid in 3D and we're going to absolutely nail it. And they did that. And I think the pacing is better. I think it's a shorter game, which feels better. It's a considerably easier game, mainly, I would argue. But this game just has bigger, darker bosses that do crazy stuff to you, and it's just really weird. And I thought the enemy of the Ing was just quite interesting and fascinating, the way that it sort of corrupted lots of parts of the world, and going between the light and dark worlds was more enjoyable than I was anticipating, to be honest. I know a lot of people criticize this game for that, but this is the slickness of Metroid Prime, but with like an added layer of darkness that I just really, really took to. And I know that you really don't want to try this game, Nbz, but I hope at some point that at least the Prime trilogy will filter its way through to you.
Look, I got a fucked up relationship with Metroid Prime 2, you know? It's real bad. It's real bad. It's
that worm boss, eh? That worm boss.
Like, it's not just that, though. It's just the whole idea of being in an atmosphere that is constantly killing you, you know? Like, that whole notion of the dark world that it's like, well, better get into the fucking beam. Or the dome,
get in the
or
safe
you're
zone.
gonna die.
Here
Like,
we
you better go, hurry up, or we're gonna literally kill you by breathing. Like,
yeah.
I can't. It's so tense. It's just so tense. You said that this was like a really difficult game as well. So
yeah,
I'm surprised that you kind of overcame that stuff and were like, yeah, I still fucking love this.
Yeah,
which I can respect.
Yeah, it was. I think if I had to list like sort of my proudest gaming achievements, I think beating this game is really high up there because it really was hard and draining, and it was just, I don't know, it's a really, really unusual game, to be honest. And
the thing I really like about Metro Prime 2 is the lore, and it's, I didn't really get too much into it because I didn't play much of the game, but I mean, it left its mark on me because when I was playing like stupid games when I was like 13, like O Game, which is this online space thing where you make a planet and stuff, I named all my planets after like Metroid stuff, and two of the planets were Luminoth and Ing. So, they have some real good names in the Metroid series for like sci-fi shit, and Luminoth is one of my favorites for sure. And Aether as well. Aether, a dark Aether, love it.
And who knows where the Metroid series goes in the future? And I think Federation Force is probably as far as 3D Metroid could get from Prime 2 in terms of atmosphere. And like, I do hope that Metroid tries to go dark again at some point, because I think this game proves it can be done and it can work. It just needs a few tweaks, maybe a little shorter, maybe ever so slightly less hard and brutal.
Yeah, maybe less kind of Wind Waker-esque collection at the end.
And there's a bit of there's a lot of collection, and Prime 1's got collection, and I think both of those games, it's unforgivable that they both have that, and it's a shame, but
clearly doesn't do enough to damage it, though. It's high up on this list.
Yeah, not quite enough, and it's mainly because you've experienced some of the best bits of the game before you do all that stuff, and you're already on a high, and it's just sort of a bit of a lull before the final boss. But
fair enough. I think
you can't be perfect.
With this list, Bally, it pretty much cements your position as 3D Metroid over 2D Metroid.
And I'm really excited. I've been meaning to play this for most of the year, and that's Metroid Prime 3 Corruption.
You know what, Bally? I actually think it's great that you're doing like Metroid Primes in different years, because it spreads it out a bit, and it means you're not competing with one another with all those games. So
yeah, so I'll definitely play 3 in 2017, and we'll see what I think of that game. But Nbz, what's your number 2?
My number 2 game, Bally, is the darling of the PlayStation era. It is Final Fantasy VII. It's been a thing recently where a lot of my top games of the year have been JRPGs, and I think that's because there are a lot of classic ones, and I never played them, and I'm really getting into the genre as of, starting this podcast. I've played quite a few. And last year was the example of, having Chrono Trigger on there and Persona 4 Golden. Them up. Yeah, I don't necessarily eat them up.
You go so fast.
Maybe. I'd go faster than you do.
You go faster than I do, for sure.
That's a fact. I wouldn't say that I eat them up. I'm like 30 hours into Dragon Quest VII with no end in sight, so I wouldn't say I eat them up necessarily. But man, is Final Fantasy VII a game that I did not expect to hold up this well. It really takes the blueprint of Chrono Trigger in the sense of the characters. Thing that I loved about that game was you just had this diverse crew of like completely weird different people who just kind of came together for this common purpose. And Final Fantasy VII feels like that same thing, where you have all these party members, some of whom are just really strange, like a fucking talking lion and stuff like that, that just, they all fit so well together, and the world kind of does a great job of just making it believable and making it feel like, yeah, these characters would be on this journey and doing this stuff. And it's kind of this natural progression of, hey, this is a classic JRPG and it has a really cool battle system. And yeah, it doesn't look amazing because it is a PlayStation 1 game, but I was playing the Steam version, and that version has its issues, especially in the control department, where you're like, some of the mini games don't really function as you want them to, and the control bindings are a bit of a mess to get your head around. But that stuff aside, the character models were much sharper, and the backgrounds were kind of still in their old, pre-rendered state. And, there's a case to be made that pre-rendered stuff just doesn't hold up at all anymore. But there is something about that look of an old PlayStation game that you can see they were trying to really create this sense of a world. And if you just step back a bit, expand your imagination somewhat, you can get into it in a way. And I really felt myself doing that and loving the overworld and being really surprised when I could just go across it in these ways that you could do in the old Super Nintendo days of the airship floating across the map. But back then they were using kind of the FX chip, and it still looked 2D, and I just didn't expect them to kind of do that whole full-blown overworld thing again, and this early in the PlayStation and 3D games. And yeah, it surprised me. It has some great character moments, some great story stuff, and I just think the battle system's really fun. And it, again, like Chrono Trigger, it's a very a very well-paced JRPG. I don't think you need to grind that much. The battles are challenging, but give you all the tools you need within the place that you're at. And it has a magical quality to it that I wasn't kind of prepared for. And I kind of see why people loved it back in the day. And there are flaws, and, it's not the easiest game to go back to in 2016, but I was blown away that, yeah, this Final Fantasy VII is the real deal. People love it for a reason. And it just has, you would think that it was this self-serious thing, and you kind of look at the trailers for Final Fantasy VII, and you're like, I don't know how Square are going to kind of transfer some of these really goofy moments, because as serious as the main story is and the stuff that happens with the characters, like, there's some dumb stuff going on that I find is going to be funny when Square try and approaches what the hell they're going to do about certain scenes in this new version. But it has character and it has a bite, and that's what I really like about it. And yeah, totally won me over. Final Fantasy VII, I'm a fan. Good job. So, Bally, I think it's finally time for the number one game. And I have a feeling that we're going in the same direction here.
I have a feeling, and we should make it clear, and we didn't mention this at the start, but we make our own lists for our top 10 games of the year that didn't come out this year. We make them ourselves, and we don't tell each other what we've been thinking about putting in, or tell each other what we put in. I've not seen your list, you've not seen mine.
Yep. I mean, there's proof of that in this episode where I'm like, really? Metroid Prime 2 over Zero Mission?
Exactly.
Okay.
We've surprised each other along the way. But my number one is Earthbound.
Absolutely, Bally. It is my number one as well.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's talk about it.
Yes.
This game is very special. And I was bowled over playing Earthbound this year. And, we have, again, the Backlog Club clearly has had a great influence on this year's lists with Zero Mission and this. But there are so many elements of Earthbound that have stuck with me. And I think that is the key component of it is a game can be a classic and can be revered for many reasons, and a lot of that has to do with nostalgia and people remembering stuff at the time, but the thing for me is there are moments in that game that just stuck, that I remember, that I can recall, that I hold dear, that I think are special, and that is something that Earthbound has in spades. Like, it has moments and parts and memories, despite the fact that I played it like 3 months ago or whatever it was, it has the special kind of surprise element and the memorability for me.
Yeah, I went in not knowing what to expect really, and there is just so much hype about this game and how special it is, and I really didn't get it, to be honest, from the little bits and pieces I'd seen and heard about. I was like, what's so special? It's just an RPG. But when you actually experience it, and I played a lot of this game in a very, very short space of time. And I think that really helped me grasp sort of all the different environments and the way that this game comes together. But its references to the world and how you live your life and political, religious systems and so many things that we talked about in our Backlog Club, I think it makes it just so incredibly unique, and it's got an incredible story. The ending is unbelievable, and it's got this sort of style that is so unique to itself and that no other game does in the same way or really comes particularly close. It's got its own identity that it really keeps. It really pushes its identity so much throughout the whole game, and I just really liked this game a lot. Like, I really, really liked it, and it's forever going to be one of those really, really special games. Really special games. There
is just a cohesion of all the elements in Earthbound. Like, it feels like the sort of game that would win Giant Bomb's best style category, Like, the artwork and the music and the way that everything meshes together. Like, how the writing and the music and the art and the design of the battles and the characters and their relationships to one another and the relationship to the player character. Everything is just this beautifully intertwined whole that is wacky and weird, but just works, Like, it just works. And I was always being surprised by Earthbound. Every time I got to a new area and something different happened and they took away a party member, or they threw me across the other side of the world to be someone completely different, or I was suddenly tiny on this screen where there were giant dinosaurs walking around. Like, there are moments that I kept being surprised by. And for a game that is this old and that is, in the limitations of a 16-bit system, having the number of surprises that I did was pretty astonishing.
Yeah, it takes you through these experiences you're just not expecting in the slightest. And you mentioned it a second ago, but just splitting up the party and putting not even, I say splitting up the party. You're not splitting up the party. You're moving away from the party, going with another person, and then you're playing as that person to rejoin the party. And that's a great way to expand the world and create new experiences that up until that point are fairly linear through the towns we're going through, but then all of a sudden you're just thrown onto the other side of the map, and it's a bold move but works incredibly well.
It's a great move because it lends that sense that this is a world, right? And that it's all linked together and that these places feel real because, and, you know, we talked about it in the episode, but like the flyover sections where you're seeing what's coming in the future and you know that you're going to have to traverse those areas and then, you know, coming back again, it is complete and wonderful and just joyous and weird and wacky and all the superlatives. I just think Earthbound is deserved of people saying this game is special. And I hope that we've convinced people they should play it. If they haven't listened to that episode or they haven't tried it before, it's not going to appeal to everyone. I know there are people who don't like Earthbound. I think they're crazy, but I know there are people who don't like it. But I do think that if you're a Nintendo fan, it's one you got to get to on the list at some point. And it took us way too long, Bally, to get to it. But we did. And I think that we're better for it. So there you go. That's our number one game. Both of us chose independently of one another. Earthbound. So that's it, Bally. It's our top 10. Do you want to run down all through the 10 again to remind people?
Sure. So my 10 from 10 to 1 again are number 10, Freedom Planet. Number 9, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Number 8, The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons. Number 7, Super Mario Land 2, The 6 Golden Coins. Number 6, Affordable Space Adventures. Number 5, Pokemon Red. Number 4, Fire Emblem Awakening. Number 3, Metroid Zero Mission. Number 2, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. And number 1, Earthbound.
And my top 10 are number 10, Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. Number 9, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Number 8, Undertale. Number 7, Pikmin 3. Number 6, Speedrunners. Number 5, Castlevania. Number 4, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. Number 3, Metroid Zero Mission. Number 2, Final Fantasy VII. And number 1, Earthbound. And there you have it. Those are our lists. That is our top 10 games that didn't come out this year that we beat and played this year for 2016. It's been a good year, Bally, I think. Again, I was looking at my list and I was like, I don't know if many of these games rate like highly on here, but I filled up a list relatively easily.
Yeah, I think as we've done more years of this podcast, the first year was maybe I was going straight to the top tier. And perhaps they are becoming ever so slightly diluted, you could argue. But there are still so many great games like Earthbound, like we've mentioned, that we've still not played and that I am still constantly going back to. And my backlog is still 30 games strong.
You can push through, Bally.
Exactly. So I'd love to play as many of those 30 games as possible by this time next year, but there's a little thing called the Nintendo Switch going to get in the way, perhaps.
Boy.
That I hope won't dent this list too badly, but hopefully our top 10 games of the year that didn't come out that year for 2017 can be almost as strong.
Yeah, I hope so. If they put out Final Fantasy VI on Switch, then you know what, maybe it's going to be another RPG central thing going on. But we'll have to see. We shall have to see. Bally, that is going to close out the show. However, that is the end of the episode. So before we go, let's do all the things that we usually do, like plugging ourselves.
We had an iTunes review. Shall we mention that?
We did indeed. So, as I mentioned last time, good buddy Gubbs, who I mentioned, played some speedrunners with, went and reviewed us on iTunes, and that review, Bally, you can read.
So Gub says, if I were to use one word to describe this podcast, it would be quality. It's some of the easiest listening in the podcast world and keeps me thoroughly entertained throughout the duration of my listen. This podcast has succeeded in getting me excited about not only Nintendo, but gaming in general once again. Keep it up, Bally and Nbz, and thanks for putting out such a great podcast and free of charge.
Yes, of course. No one should pay for any podcasts. I believe in a free podcast economy and a free podcast world. But thanks, Gubs. Thanks for reviewing us. That's some kind words. And we hope that you will feel like you can review us as well. So go on over to iTunes. It's real easy. Just got to use your account and just type some words and say, hey, these guys are all right. And
check them out.
We'll read it. We'll read it. So yes, thank you for everyone who has reviewed us and people who will continue to review us in the future. You can find us in various places on the internet. Bally, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. It's a travesty, but I cannot post Pokemon Sun screenshots to the Miiverse. I will...
Dire situation.
Exactly. I will hopefully play also some more Fire Emblem Fates Conquest and post a few screenshots there.
Yeah, you got to get on that, Bally, because got that discussion coming up for next time with the top 5 Nintendo games.
Top 5. But I would also recommend checking out the podcast Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast. That is the best place to go for all the latest on episodes and segment breakouts that come out on our YouTube channel that I would also highly recommend checking out. And that Twitter account is actually, I mentioned this last time, that it was nearing 400. I think we're one under 400 now. We're on 399.
Well,
so if for the end of the year, my one Christmas wish, it's to get past 400.
Come on, guys. You don't want to break Bally's heart here.
Don't break my heart. We're almost
it's the one thing he wants. All he wants for Christmas is you to follow the Twitter account. So go ahead and do that. You can also see on that Twitter account some amazing artwork which was made by Lizzie Dawson, as we mentioned last time. We forgot to mention her Twitter handle. Her Twitter handle is at More Hand Claps. You can follow her there and see some other amazing stuff she does. Every week, usually does some sketches of the Giant Bomb crew, which are always amazing and fun to look at. And want to thank her once again for providing that amazing artwork of me and Bally just bobbing around in the King of Red Lions.
The King of
just
Red
having a great
Lions.
old time. You can find me on the internet. I'm at Lordnbz on Twitter. That is also my Miiverse name. We can be found on the Gmails if you want to email us, and the email address is Bally.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We always need more emails, and especially right now, we need your games of the year that came out this year. Because
yes,
that
indeed.
is what we are going to be talking about next time. And as usual, we will be compiling and debating in a list that will reach a top 5 that will represent This Nintendo Life's top 5 games of 2016.
Yes, so go ahead. We've had a couple of emails for 2016 Game of the Year lists, but if you haven't done it yet, you got 2 more weeks. So head over to your email account and send us your list, and we'll read them like we did the lists of today from some very nice people who sent them in. Other things, we can be found in various places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we are on YouTube. Our YouTube account is youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife. Very easy to find now, and all that good stuff. And I think, Bally, that is pretty much us. We're doing things are happening. It's an exciting time of year. How are you feeling going into December, going into the top 5 games next week? Do you think it's going to be a bloodbath? Do you think it's going to be a fun time?
I think that there will be quite a bit of agreement. I think it'll be an easy one. All right,
well, we'll see. It's usually not as fun when it's an easy one.
I'm excited about a bit of time off and to dive into some very long games I'm in the middle of right now. So
yeah, I mean, we've got Star Wars as well on the horizon.
Oh boy!
So look out for a special Star Wars podcast probably in the new year.
You know it.
The tradition that will continue. Star
Wars every year.
Yeah, for the rest of our lives, Bally, the rest of our lives. So there you go. That's going to be us for the podcast. Thank you all for listening. We love you all. It's been a great year for the podcast, and I hope you guys continue to listen and continue to enjoy the show because we love making
There's one more episode this year, Nbz. Can you believe it?
I can't. It's
one
gone
more.
so fast. It's gone so fast. Blink of an eye. Before we know it, we'll have the Switches in our laps. So it's coming around the corner. But yeah, thank you all for listening. We'll see you in the last episode of 2016 next time. I'm becoming South African now. But until then, thanks. We love you, and goodbye, everyone. The musical interlude used on today's show was 2 Feet and a Heartbeat from Runbow. Copyright 13am Games, 2015.
Number 2, the Banner Saga. The Banner Saga? Banner Saga. Saga.
Let's go again. The Banner Saga. Say saga, not saga. Saga. The Banner
What
Saga.
did I say?
The Banner Saga.
The Banner Saga.
The Banana Saga.
The Banana Sack.
The Banana Sack. All right, go again.
All right, ready?